Termination Logs 682. Due to the destructive, adaptive, and aggressive nature of YOS 682, termination is immediately ordered. Because of the failure of YOS 414, its adaptive capabilities could backfire and cause destructive results. The Foundation is ordered to use these methods with extreme caution. Termination Logs. Item: YOS 123. Tissue test record not applicable. Notes from test: YOS 123 was sent into YOS 682's containment chamber, and both entities directly observed one another. YOS 682 then begins looking around, seeing things that aren't present, presumably caused by YOS 123's effect. YOS 682 then shows distress and backs up, presses against one of the walls. YOS 682's body then begins to show extreme damage caused by an invincible force. And YOS 682 roars in pain. Once YOS 682 has been reduced to 64% of its body mass, it remains immobile and never moves from its position. D-Class personnel then went in to retrieve YOS 123, cautiously approaching it while observing YOS 682. Once D-Class personnel removed YOS 123 from the chamber, they reported seeing miniature versions of YOS 682 staring at them with no facial features. The D-Class were eventually killed by the illusions of the entities, and after their termination, YOS 682 later showed signs of movement. Item: YOS 256. Tissue test record. A small sample of YOS 256's liquid was dropped onto the removed skin of YOS 682, and it immediately dissolved. Notes from test: a 13-gallon tank of YOS 256's liquid was dumped into YOS 682's skin. YOS 682 then roared in pain as the liquid dissolved most of its body. Once the liquid dissolved most of its body, YOS 682 became immobilized after this. After 2 hours of no movement, it immediately regenerated and started leaking liquid similar to YOS 256, causing massive structural damage. YOS 682 then breached containment and caused injuries and deaths from its leaking liquid. YOS 682 was eventually recaptured and placed in an acid-resistant container, and was placed into a temporary containment chamber until repairs are finished onto its chamber. Note: let's not try that again. Item: a large vacuum making machine. Tissue test record not applicable. Notes from test: the machine is placed into YOS 682's containment chamber and was flipped to the on switch. The vacuum emitted from the machine stripped YOS 682 of its flesh, leaving only bones. The bones stay intact, and YOS 682 was immobilized. After 3 hours, YOS 682 showed movement and formed a vacuum as soon as D-Class personnel entered to remove the machine. All D-Class subjects were stripped of their flesh and immediately expired. YOS 682 later removed its vacuum 3 hours later. Item: YOS 071. Tissue test record not applicable. Notes from test: YOS 071 was placed on YOS 682's face via mechanical arm. Nothing happens for another 15 minutes until a large entity resembling YOS 682 appears on security footage and YOS 682 itself. YOS 682 backed away slowly as soon as YOS 071-1 approached it slowly before it attacked YOS 682. YOS 682 and YOS 071-1 engaged for 15 hours before YOS 071-1 disappeared from view. YOS 682 then sat down without moving, allowing YOS 071 to be removed from it. Item: YOS 026. Tissue test record not applicable. Notes from test: YOS 026 was placed in a glass case and put into YOS 682's containment chamber. Personnel were instructed to move away from the cell by 20 meters to prevent any incidents. YOS 026 was seen writing "Kill YOS 682. YOS 682 immediately seemed to die after the sentence was completed. After 2 hours, YOS 682 showed movement and didn't attempt a containment breach nor showed its adaptation. YOS 026 remained inert for the duration of the test. Item: YOS 157. Tissue test record YOS 157 was given a chunk of YOS 682's torn flesh. Sample consumed without incident. Notes from test. YOS 157 placed into chamber. YOS 682 attempted to kill YOS 157 and only startled it. YOS 157 stung YOS 682 and laid its eggs into its flesh. The eggs hatched immediately and began eating YOS 682. The newly formed YOS 157 specimens matured into an adult and continued to eat YOS 682 until it's nothing but bones. After 34 minutes, YOS 682 developed a long tongue that sticks to the insects, and it began capturing and eating the insects. All insects were consumed, and YOS 682 remained inert for the duration of the test. Item YOS 748 Tissue test worker. NA. Notes from test. YOS 748 introduced in cell. YOS 682 didn't notice YOS 748 at this point. YOS 748 became aggressive and stung YOS 682, but 682 didn't react. YOS 682 showed major distress after 3 hours prior to exposure. After 15 more minutes, YOS 682's skeleton changed into a shape resembling a banana. After 2 hours of exposure, no further changes were present, and YOS 682 remained inert. After 3 minutes of no activity, YOS 682 showed movement, but experienced difficulties in moving on its own. YOS 682 seemed to have reconstructed the skeleton and was able to move again. YOS 682 breached containment soon after. YOS 748 was recontained while YOS 682 was in the process of being recaptured. Item YOS 809 Tissue test record not applicable. Notes from test. YOS 809 was bounced into YOS 682's containment chamber. The object reached high speeds and reached 875 miles per hour. It was strong enough to crush YOS 682. YOS 682 was crushed numerous times by YOS 809 and was immobilized in the process. After 14 minutes, YOS 682 developed a tendon that immediately stopped YOS 809's movement. No other activity was detected, and YOS 809 was removed. Item high temperatures. Tissue test record not applicable. Notes from test. The chamber's temperature rises up to 5,000 degrees Celsius, and the chamber was inaccessible to personnel. After several minutes of exposure, YOS 682 would start releasing extremely low temperatures from itself until the chamber is cooled down. Personnel were instructed not to enter the chamber at this time. After 3 hours, the chamber returned to normal temperatures. Item YOS 498 Tissue test record. Skin of YOS 682 immediately disintegrated after coming into contact with YOS 498's liquid. Notes from test. A 6-meter tank filled with YOS 498's liquid was poured onto YOS 682. YOS 682's skin immediately began to disintegrate, causing YOS 682 to roar in pain. All of YOS 682's skin and parts of its skeleton were disintegrated, and YOS 682 was immobilized. After 3 hours of prior to exposure, YOS 682 recovered and began releasing liquids similar in composition to YOS 498, and severely damaged the chamber. YOS 682 attempted to breach containment soon after. Note: imagine if it managed to kill some personnel inside the chamber. I recommend this method not to be used again. Dr. Edward. Item YOS 1102 Tissue test record not applicable. Notes from test. YOS 1102 was taped near the entrance to the containment chamber and was in view of YOS 682. YOS 682 didn't notice at first and was showing no movement, probably resulting in YOS 1102's effect. After 4 minutes of inactivity, YOS 682 was attacked by an invisible force, but YOS 682 was oblivious to this. After 3 hours, YOS 682 was reduced to 78% of its body mass until immediately lunging at the spot where the invisible was located. YOS 682 presumably terminated the force as no activity has occurred. YOS 1102 was later removed from the chamber. Item YOS 1122 Tissue test record not applicable. Notes from test. A single YOS 1122 instance introduced in the chamber. Instances began to reproduce and began increasing in numbers. YOS 1122's number reached 560, and YOS 682 became covered in them. YOS 1122's number later reached 2,563 after 2 hours, and the chamber was covered by them. One instance managed to enter the chamber, and the number began increasing exponentially outside of it. The site had to be evacuated, and several personnel suffocated under YOS 1122 instances in the process. Note: great. Thanks to whoever thought of this. Now we have an even bigger problem in there. Now you see why we need to terminate YOS 1122 because of this. Dr. Edward. Item: YOS 1163. Tissue test record, not applicable. Notes from test: subject introduced to chamber. YOS 682 immediately discharged the subject, only to stop and be exposed to YOS 1163's visual effects. YOS 682 eventually became docile, and YOS 1163 then stroked and embraced his head. YOS 1163 was removed soon after. Note: that was too cute. I'd like to see this again someday. Dr. Lilly. Note 2: are you sure about this, Lilly? Who knows what will happen eventually. Dr. Edward. Item: YOS 1362. Tissue test record, not applicable. Notes from tests: YOS 1362A and B introduced to chamber. Subject B immediately attacked YOS 682, and YOS 682 started getting enveloped in YOS 1362 itself. After being entirely covered, YOS 682 began to attack both subjects and started to consume YOS 1362. No other activity was detected. Item: YOS 1499. Tissue test record, not applicable. Notes from test: YOS 1499 introduced to chamber while in its inactive state. YOS 1499 immediately activated once YOS 682 observed it, and began to burn YOS 682 once its light came into contact with it. YOS 682 became immobilized after 35 minutes. After 1.5 hours of exposure, YOS 682 recovered and emitted a bright light that burned personnel present in the viewing room. YOS 682 breached containment soon after. Note: further testing of YOS 1499 is prohibited due to concerns with other anomalies. Dr. Edward. Item: YOS 2319. Tissue test record, not applicable. Notes from test: a large dose of YOS 2319's venom injected into YOS 682 via mechanical arm. YOS 682 began to become agitated and very exhausting after 3 hours of exposure. 7 minutes later, YOS 682 became immobilized. After 3 hours, YOS 682 immediately recovers, and the venom was released by YOS 682, causing gross damage to its cell. The chamber was locked down with strong metal to prevent another breach. The cell was repaired as the test concluded. Item: YOS 2167. Tissue test record, not applicable. Notes from test: YOS 682 was placed into YOS 2167's containment area by a pickup truck. YOS 682 wandered around the edges of the building until being attacked by YOS 2167. YOS 682 attempted to fend off the attacker, but YOS 2167 outmaneuvered every attack attempt by YOS 682 and incapacitated it. YOS 682 was reduced to 95% of its body mass, and YOS 682 was retrieved before it could regenerate itself. Note: man, I really expected that to work. 2167 is mostly known to absolutely demolish anything she sees, but big things such as 682 cannot be destroyed entirely by her, and usually leaves traces behind. Despite this being a failure, that was the closest thing to a neutralized 682. Dr. Edward. Item: YOS 1389. Tissue test record, not applicable. Notes from test: YOS 1389 placed in the containment chamber. YOS 682 makes visual contact with YOS 1389. 682, after 3 minutes, started showing symptoms. YOS 682 moved backwards while turning its head frantically, presumably by the visions caused by 1389. After 4 hours of exposure, YOS 682's eyes glowed blue, and it was extremely docile. Personnel aren't advised to enter the chamber during this stage. After 3 more hours of exposure, YOS 682 started leaking dark substance from its body, but didn't immediately expire. YOS 682 breached containment, and for unknown reasons, its eyes still glow blue, infecting any personnel who looked at it. YOS 682 left no casualties on its own, and instead tried to escape. Contained soon by personnel with protective eyewear, and his eyes stopped glowing after 2 hours. Item: YOS 1564. Tissue test record, not applicable. Notes from test: for YOS 1564, 1564 specimens put into a chamber. 1564 immediately animated and flung towards YOS 682. YOS 682 bore in pain and attempted to remove the specimens from itself. YOS 1564 specimens inserted themselves deeper into YOS 682's body to further disorient it further. YOS 682 appeared weaker and stopped its attempted attack, and soon plummeted onto the ground. YOS 1564 specimens presumably drained all of YOS 682's blood and became inanimate. D-Class personnel was sent to extract the dormant YOS 1564 specimens before YOS 682 moved and killed them. The YOS 1564 specimens rolled down to the entrance of the chamber, where personnel were able to safely extract. That's it for today's video. I'll see you in the next one.